It is hard to recount this story. Really, really hard. Every time I think about it, my eyes just well up with tears, and before I even know it, I've spent hours just laying on the couch with my eyes streaming, just thinking about the event. This happened the best part of a decade ago, and it still paralyzes me to think about. My husband and I, we are not together anymore, and it's mainly because we cannot get past this. When this happened, our first and only child had just been born. It was a boy who we named Jacob. He had to be in the NICU because he was a premature birth, and when he came out, he was so tiny. We could not take him home for quite a long time, so we both used to sleep in the hospital every night and see him every single moment that we could. I was attached to him. Probably an obvious thing to state, but not all mothers feel that way, especially immediately postpartum. I loved that kid, and I would protect him with my life. I would do anything to get him back. Say, it all started one night after we brought him home. I think he'd only been back for 2 or 3 days by this point. My husband and I were both exhausted, and I knew his time off was over and that he had to go back to driving trucks for a living. I think he managed to weasel his way into having a week off. The company were really reluctant. It was a whole entire ordeal. We are in an at-will state, and my husband was terrified that they would drop him like a stone and that he would be out of work and not able to support us financially anymore. He had to go back in the morning, so it was going to be my first day parenting alone. I had all kinds of thoughts running through my head. What if I got it wrong? What if I wasn't enough? What if I hurt Jacob by accident? Because of all of this overthinking, it took me a really long time to finally drift off. At around 2 or 3 a.m., I was jolted awake. At first, I didn't know why, but it only took a few seconds before I was hearing some sounds. Jacob was sleeping in another room. I know that sounds silly for a premature baby, but there was not enough room to fit the crib into our tiny cramped room, and I did not want to co-sleep with all of the horror stories I'd heard about parents rolling over and crushing the child at night. I was a worrier and an overthinker, sue me. I heard what sounded like creaking on the hardwood floor. It was as if someone quite heavy was taking steps, but were purposefully trying to lessen the amount of pressure that they were putting down in order to be quieter and trying to sneak through. I only heard this coming from inside Jacob's room. I heard Jacob cry. You know when babies burst into fits of high-pitched crying? It started, but it almost seemed to be cut off in the middle, as if someone had grabbed his mouth and silenced him before he could fully cry properly. I did not hear any crying at all after that. I shook my husband, and he was pretty annoyed since he had to be at work in a couple of hours. I mouthed to him, I think someone is in the house, and he was like, I'm sure it's nothing. I got annoyed with him and straight up told him, I am telling you, I know what I heard, and I leaped up and grabbed the bat that was beside the bed. I guess he could tell that I was not joking, because he got up pretty sharpish and pulled out the 6-shooter he kept in the bedside drawer. I hated that thing. Guns always made me feel really nervous, and so I would always argue with him about not having such a thing in the house, telling him all the statistics about accidents and such. I will admit though, at that point, it made me feel a whole lot safer. Not that I would ever tell him that. I think it was a .38 Smith & Wesson or something. I don't know. I am not an expert in the slightest. He went first, of course, but I was not far behind him. I wasn't so much scared as I was worried about my child. Fear kind of just goes out of the window when it comes to those kinds of things. You become a lot more brave, braver than you ever thought you could be. I remember that we got to the door, and all I could see coming from underneath it was this blinding, bright light. It was like someone had taken the sun and just put it into my son's room. My husband inched the door open very slowly while readying his weapon. I remember that right at the end, he shoved the door open with one smooth motion, pointed the gun, and started shouting, "Get on the ground, get away from my son, or I will shoot." It was like time just completely slowed down in that moment. There were these two things near my son in the crib. They were humanoid, but they were as small as toddlers. But their arms and fingers were incredibly long, probably twice the length of their torsos, maybe longer. They were both propped up on the sides of the crib, looking down at my son, using their incredibly long hands and arms in order to tower slightly over him. They had these short, stumpy little legs, and it was like they used their hands for legs instead. It did not really make much sense to my scared mind. One of them had his hands wrapped around my son's face, and as soon as I saw this, I was screaming, shouting, "Do something, help him." These long fingers were wrapped around his entire face, but like multiple times, like they were elastic or something. At the sight of my husband, one of them leaped down onto the floor on just its arms. My husband aimed at the thing and went to shoot, but he stopped. He just stopped aiming. He aimed and was shaking really, really badly at the thing, but after a couple of seconds, he took the gun and he turned it back on himself. He had the gun pressed up pretty tight against the underside of his skull where his neck was, and he was shaking so violently back and forth with this just blank expression on his face. He didn't even look scared or angry or anything. His face was just blank. I started shouting, asking him what the hell he was doing, but he would not respond back to me. I rushed over to him and wrestled the gun out of his hands, and once it was almost free of his fingers, it just dropped down onto the ground, and his hands and arms fell down loosely by his sides. This thing, it wasted no time. It was scuttling over with this weird run. It would spin its arms around in like a 360-degree motion when it ran, like its arms were more like wheels. But it moved so quickly it was like I couldn't fully see the motion. It grabbed the gun, tossed it underneath the crib to the other side of the room, and in the same motion, it used its momentum from its other foot, or hand rather, to leap at my husband and cling to his face. My husband just stood there, staring off into space, not even trying to fight back. His whole body was just vibrating and shaking. I raised the bat and went to help him, but I heard something inside of my head. It was a voice, but the voice was not mine, and all it said was, "Don't." And upon hearing this inside of my head, I just dropped the bat. I stopped doing anything at all but watching. It was like I was not in control anymore. All I could do was stand and watch and breathe. It only took a few more seconds of my husband just standing there and not fighting before the thing dropped off of his face and continued back to the crib. I was powerless to do anything. I don't know how long I stood there until I blacked out. They poked and prodded at my son. The first one never unfurled its long elastic fingers from around his face. It was using them to hold open his eyelids, which only looked pure white, and from where I was standing, like the eyes were rolled back. They were also forcefully holding open his mouth while blocking his nose. I don't know how these fingers had the dexterity to do so many tasks at once, or even the strength. I suppose because of this, I got a better look at these things, these aliens. They were a strange color. They looked like they were made of a sort of a wet clay. They always looked shiny, like they were soaked, and their skin had these weird folds everywhere, like they were melting. I remember that they were quite flaky. When that thing leaped away from my husband, he had flakes still clinging to his face, like they were pasted on with PVA glue. After that, I don't remember. I remembered in the morning and ran to my baby. I was back on my bed when I woke back up. My husband was already gone. I assumed he just went to work. He could not afford to lose the money. Jacob was fine, but after that night, things took a turn for the worst. He was quiet, really quiet throughout the whole day. He refused any kind of milk, natural, powdered formula. He would just shake his head when trying to feed him and try and move his mouth away like he understood what he was doing. When I would force him to eat, he would immediately be sick. All of this only lasted for around 2 days. On the first day, when he wouldn't eat and felt hot to the touch, I called a doctor to come and check on him. They gave me medication to give and guidance for the treatment and told me to call again if it worsened within 24 hours or take him straight to the emergency room. I cared for him as best as I could. He started leaking. I know that sounds weird, but it's the only way I can describe it. I kept trying to feed him because obviously he would be unwell and die otherwise, and he would vomit this horrible thing. It had the same wetness and texture of clay, just like those things. His nose would start randomly running and would leak these long and gooey strands from his nostrils. This would last for hours on end. I remember calling my husband and begging him to come home. He knew that Jacob was sick, but he did not know it had gotten so bad. I told him the job did not matter anymore, that we could find him another, that I would ask my mom for money, etc. But he told me no. He sounded really shaken up on the phone and really frightened. He told me that he had to work and could not lose this money. He told me that he had to support us no matter what. He sounded like he was crying when he said it, but I'd never seen him act so uncaring before. I'd seen him drop entire 3-day conferences at his previous job at a moment's notice whenever I needed him. He told me to just call the doctor again and keep on checking on him. He actually hung up on me before I could even talk again. I think this is basically where our marriage fell apart. I felt like he abandoned me right then. Shortly before I called the doctor, I was just singing to Jacob and rubbing his chest. I was holding his tiny little hand that was barely even bigger than my pinky finger, and I noticed that on his left hand, there was a big patch of skin that when I moved my fingers over it, it felt different. It wasn't as smooth as it was before. It was actually quite coarse, and it felt almost wet, but there was no kind of liquid on him. But the color of the skin there had changed partially too. It was almost like a deep yellowy brown. That is when I called the doctor again, and I was told that he would be there in the morning, but that if it was an emergency, he could send an ambulance right now. I told him I didn't know. I told him about the discharge in the skin. I told him that Jacob had not so much as gone to the toilet once in the last few days, which was not normal. He asked if he was breathing, about taking in food and other stuff. He told me if I was worried, then going to the hospital right now was the only thing to do. And so he called me an ambulance. Jacob was put in intensive care again, and I could barely see him. I saw him again near nighttime once the doctor said that he was stable. They told me that he still had a fever and was not really eating, but that they were working on it and that he would be perfectly fine. That other than that, he was in perfect health. I remember I sat with him and talked with him. My husband was on his way back, but he was 2 states away, so he would be another few hours. I remember I fell asleep at some point. I was only right nearby, but I remember waking back up and feeling really drowsy. I had fallen asleep out of nowhere and it was dark, and it took me a few seconds to even realize where I was. No nurse had come to fetch me or check on me, which I found kind of odd. I got the fright of my life. When I opened up my eyes, I saw one of those things again. One of those clay aliens. It was on top of the glass of the thing that my baby was in. It was just sat there, hunched over, just like it was on Jacob's crib. And it was staring at me. I wanted to scream right then and there, but something stopped me. This thing kind of tilted its head while looking at me back and forth, raised its long arms and fingers, and put one of those fingers up to my lips like it was shushing me. When it did this, I instantly became drowsy again and fell back asleep. I woke up to doctors throwing me out of the room due to an emergency. They would not really give me much information other than the fact that Jacob was unwell and needed urgent care. He passed away with me just outside the door. It had been hours and my husband still was not there when I got the news. I don't know where the fuck he was. All I could do was sob to myself in that little waiting area and call my mom and beg her to help me. Not that she could really do all that much. I can't remember the explanation that they gave me. It was blamed on the fever and SIDS. That's all. They did not note anything about the skin or the leakage. I guess it just was not something that they observed. When my husband finally got there, I could not even look at him. He had a whole story and was basically crying, and I knew he was scared, and I knew that he felt just as bad as me, but I just couldn't. I did not have the strength or the energy. I wasn't angry with him, I was just done. That is the main part that I wanted to tell you. Our relationship fell apart over the next few years. Neither of us felt like we wanted to try for another child. We could not bear it after Jacob. We tried to reignite the spark, to talk about things, to try to be normal, but it just was not possible. I still love him. I just can't ever look at him without feeling pain, without seeing our dying son, without seeing those things. There is one more detail that I don't know if it's connected in any way or not. I forgot about it for quite a while with everything going on, but I remembered it weeks later. One of the nurses said that someone tried to visit Jacob in the NICU while I was gone for a couple of hours, freshening up and buying more things for the baby. For extended family, the rules are pretty strict for visits, so the person was turned away and told to speak to me. I was told it was an old man with balding gray hair. I was told he was a few inches taller than me and had a thick Missouri accent. I thought it was probably my dad, and I thanked the nurse. My dad and I were estranged, but he knew about the birth of my kid from other family members, I guess. Every few years, he would reach out to me and try and make an effort for a really short amount of time, ask to borrow some money from me for whatever reason, which he would say was life or death, and he would beg me for days straight and just keep on pestering me until I would finally give in. And then he would blow all of that money in the casino and proceed to ghost me for months or years. I figured maybe he tried to come and surprise visit Jacob, since that's just the kind of weird guy that he was. I didn't even think of it for those few weeks because I was preoccupied, and I also really was not prepared to interact with him again. I was just too stressed, and I did not want to deal with him. Well, when I finally remembered, I shot him a text and I asked him about it, but he told me no. He told me that he was about 2 states away and had not been anywhere near. He told me he did not even know I was having a baby, that he was not in contact with Jesse anymore. That's my brother who still talks to him, or did rather, and that he does not tell him anything anymore. Still, it could be nothing, or it could be something. I don't know anymore. I was told that people here have seen weird things and might be able to relate. All I know is that I have been crying the entire time I typed this out. Okay, so this happened to me and my brother. We have a nearby wetland refuge. It's like some ecology study area. It's apparently some kind of rare biome type, whatever, I don't really know. The refuge is a middling size, about 20 square miles. There's something kinda off about it. It's way quieter than the surrounding countryside. Birds are present there, but they are not very chirpy. There's also lots of big spiders everywhere. Anyway, me and my brother go exploring around there. We reach the ass end of the refuge. The trail just sort of stops. The clearing is a little ways through the woods. It has a broken down fence that's rusted to pieces. The entire place is just wide open. We think, sure, why the hell not, and we wander into the area. Probably the most notable feature are the 2 large school buses, and there's plenty of other dismantled vehicles all around. There are these knickknacks everywhere, like bobbleheads and those hula girl things. Upon a closer inspection of the buses, we can see that there are actually bullet holes in them. There are FMJ fragments and slugs recovered. Now, I'm a little creeped out. I'm thinking, I don't know about this, bro. But we keep on exploring like a dumbass. We discover a continuation of the trail up a low berm. At the crest of the berm, we discover this mini fridge that is wrapped in gator tie-downs. Right next to the mini fridge, there is actually a coffee table Bible. It's covered in mold, and it has what looks like scorch marks on the top of it. Now I really have a bad feeling about this, but my brother still does not listen and just continues. He decides to open up the mini fridge. It takes a long while. The straps are all interlocked. My brother finally cracks the seal. I smell the nastiest smell ever in my life. It smelled sweet and meaty and also rotten as balls. My brother looks into the fridge. He starts freaking right the fuck out. While he is doing this, I notice more doodads and children's toys in the immediate vicinity of the fridge. They're all arranged in a circle. And out of nowhere, we start to hear this ATV motor noise, and we are like, screw it, let's bail. We rush to the bottom of the berm and hide in the tall grass. We can just sort of see out of the tall grass, and we see this grungy hillbilly dude ride past us up the hill on an ATV. He has 2 children with him on the back of it. All of them are dressed identically. The motor cuts off as they crest the berm. The hillbilly starts raging like primal hatred. He starts punching the ATV like a madman. Finally, the motor starts back up, and he just drives off further into unexplored territory. My brother and I sprint a mile or so back and up the trail. We can hear that ATV patrolling the woods near the clearing for about 30 minutes. When the coast finally clears, we book it the rest of the 3 miles all the way back to my truck. We drive home, dead silent the whole way. To this day, my brother still will not tell me what he saw in the fridge. I actually have a little bit more regarding this location and the actual hillbilly encampment if y'all are interested. My bro and I are considering going back and snapping some photos for documentation. So, this is at the exact same nature preserve. We decide to go back to the hillbilly camp. This time, the gate has been replaced. There is this crappily written message in what looks like mud or shit or something, but maybe it's just some weird ass paint. All it says is, "Keep out government and other assholes." I'm like, what? We proceed into the compound. We go around the buses, right side of the berm. There is this massive trash pile. If any of you go exploring the woods or live in a rural or semi-rural area, it was about the size of a stock pond. The berm bisects the trash heap. It plateaus back at the fridge. I find a small sheet metal shed full of backpacks, hiking equipment, kerosene lanterns, and oil cans. We traverse back to the flat path. The mini fridge is gone. We continue. There is another trash lake, mostly sheet metal, more buses, and an honest-to-God trailer home. The trailer seems to be inhabited. It has interior lights that are on. We go back. We find more small sheet metal structures full of random stuff. We discover the house. It's this white, dilapidated farmhouse with massive damage to the exterior and boarded up windows. The clotheslines are covered in musty quilts and rags. We hear the ATV approaching, and we get the hell out of there. This happened to me 2 years ago, when I was just chilling with my friend in my backyard. It was a cloudy night, pretty windy too. It was around 8 p.m. My friend and I are just shooting the shit. We have not chilled in a while. He says something like, "I think I see the world for what it really is." My response is, "I feel like I see almost nothing." My intent was to convey that there is more to life than what we can see, that there is a lot more going on behind the scenes that as humans we cannot detect. My friend looks up at the sky and just points, and he says, "What's that?" I look. I see a white orb floating in the sky, just beneath the clouds, and it's glowing. It looks like it has a bright red flame all around it, like engulfing it. We are both freaking out. 2 more orbs suddenly appear, looking exactly the same. This circular, glowing white with bright red flames. They looked as if they moved from inside the clouds outside. The orbs are in a triangular formation, moving across the sky. More orbs start to appear, following the original 3. The orbs are in this equilateral triangle formation. They are moving in a straight line in unison at the exact same speed so that their formation is not altered at all. Then the 4th orb appears behind the orb in the back. The orbs are aligned in such a way that the 3rd orb that's in the back of the triangle seems to be steering or directing the path of all of the orbs across the sky. The 2 front orbs in the triangle are the only ones not in the line of orbs. More orbs start to appear equidistant from the 3rd and the 4th, staying in that same line. In total, we saw about 9 of these orbs appear in the sky, and we were just freaking out. I literally thought that we would go inside and hear about the apocalypse on the news. That is how scared I was. The orbs eventually float out of sight. We reviewed the cell phone footage. The orbs look completely different in the photos. They are about 4 to 5 times bigger. They look like 2D silver discs, except for a concave bulge in the center. They look nothing like what we saw. There is no red tint whatsoever. But we are relieved that the world is not ending. I'm freaked out, but I'm starting to feel a little bit better. My parents get home, and my friend gets in his car to leave. My friend hates whenever I bring this up. He never wants to talk about it. I experienced a strange event in the summer of 1970. I was 18 years old and lived on a farm with my parents, grandparents, and siblings. We lived in the town of Geneseo, Illinois. Our house was almost completely surrounded by woods. One night, at about 2 a.m., I awoke and became aware that I was not in bed in the basement of the house, but rather, I was sitting on a bench in an unknown room with one young adult male. The room was constructed of white-colored metal with benches. There was a door in the room, and on either side of the door were windows from which I could see a passageway going to the left and the right. The other person in the room with me sat on the bench to the left side of the door and completely ignored me even when I shook him and tried to get him to look at me and talk to me. He just sat on the bench with his elbows on his knees, gazing downward between his legs at the floor. He was completely oblivious to me. I tried to open up the door, but it was locked, and I got up on the bench to the right side of the door and leaned against the glass, trying to see something. It was just an empty passageway. The room was brightly lit, but no source of light was noticed. I again tried to get the man in the room to pay attention to me and help me understand what was happening, but still, he just sat there. I looked up at the window and saw a bizarre creature about 6 feet tall, covered with reddish-colored long hair, but the face still looked human-like. It did not pay any attention to us in the room, slowly walking by the window. I was very scared. I jumped up onto the bench and then beat on the plexiglass and screamed. The being just kept on walking by. That was the last thing that I remember. I woke up in my bed at around 5:30 in the morning when it was time to go and do my chores. I did notice these red contusions on the palm of my hands, and my arms were very sore for a few days afterwards. Did this really happen to me? And never told my parents or anyone else because I was sure that they would not believe me. I have never had another incident like this that I can recall.